I caught my wife cheating with her boss's husband, so I'm married to her ex-best friend. My wife, 27F, and I, 24M, met at the Burning Man Festival. At the time, I had just graduated college and started a full-time job in Nevada. She lived and worked in Colorado. When we got to talking, I realized I never wanted to stop talking to her. I felt myself falling for her and wishing we lived closer. We exchanged numbers and started talking as soon as the festival ended. Really, she texted me even before I reached my car. We maintained a long-distance relationship for a year before she asked me to move in with her. I found a job in her state and packed my bags. It was only another year before I bought a house and proposed to her. Neither of us had more than 2 family members that kept in touch, so we had a small wedding ceremony with them. Our marriage was just what I wanted and expected it to be. I was convinced I had met the coolest, most suitable and exciting woman I could find. I wanted to love her forever, and she said the same to me. Before I moved in with her, she wasn't a very tidy person, but she made it a goal of hers to keep a clean, organized home for us. By the time we moved into our house, she was a wonderful housekeeper and a woman worthy of being a wife. She also really enjoyed her full-time job, working for a boss that was also her best friend. I heard a lot of great things about Tiffany. They met in college and remained close until Tiffany's business was well enough off the ground that she could hire people. My wife was there for her and proved herself to be an excellent employee. Since my wife was there from the start, she made a generous salary. I never met Tiffany, but my wife and her went out together every once in a while to blow off work steam, they'd say. About 4 years after we were married, I noticed my wife was holding her phone a lot. More than she used to. She started holding onto it or keeping it in her pockets. I seriously doubted this meant anything bad, because my wife was still just as sweet and attentive as she always was. Looking back on it, she might have been even more sweet and attentive than usual. On one ordinary Friday evening, she texted me that she was going out with Tiffany. I replied that I would meet my brother for dinner and see her at home by 9:1. Left the house to meet him, but he canceled plans. I returned home and went straight to the bathroom before turning any lights on. While I was in there, I heard the front door open and 2 voices. I turned off the bathroom light and listened. I heard my wife giggle and open the back sliding door, then I heard a man's voice. I watched them from within the shadows of the house. They stripped off their clothes and jumped in the pool. They frolicked and splashed around for a bit before they started making out and having sex. I grabbed the man's pants, found his wallet, and took his ID. His last name sounded familiar. I got in my car and drove to his house. I knocked on the door and was greeted by a gorgeous woman. I handed her her husband's ID and told her what he was doing at my house with my wife. She didn't want to believe it at first, but as it sunk in she became devastated. She started cursing and grabbing anything of his to throw outside. She invited me to wait with her inside for him to return home. I didn't really want to, but I also didn't want to go home. So we waited. He arrived home and his wife handed him his ID. He was confused, and even more so when I stepped forward. I told him I found it in his wallet, in his pants, after he stripped for my wife. His jaw dropped, and he just looked between us before getting frustrated and embarrassed, asking what was going to happen now. His wife kicked him out right in front of me. I wanted to leave, but she took a moment from yelling to ask me to stay. Once he was out of the house, she sat down with me and apologized for what happened, on behalf of her husband and my wife. We got to talking and it didn't take long for me to realize this was Tiffany. This was my wife's best friend and boss. I freaked out, and told her who my wife was. She could not believe it. She called my wife and told her she needed her to come over right away. When she got there, we both confronted her, telling her she just cheated on me with her best friend's husband. My wife freaked out, crying, swearing that she didn't know he was her husband. She looked at me and pleaded for me to believe that this was just a meaningless mistake. She said they had met at a bar and that he wasn't wearing a ring. I asked her when and why she was even at a bar alone, but then I said it didn't matter. And it didn't matter how sorry she was, because she still willingly brought another man into my house and slept with him. Tiffany said even if my wife didn't know he was her husband, she was not the kind of friend or employee she needed in her life. My wife was broken in that instant. She didn't know what to do with herself. She just kept pleading with empty words. I told her to move out of my house. Tiffany invited me back inside. She screamed after us and even banged on the door. Eventually she was moved out of my house and the divorce was final. She was a huge waste of my time, but if it weren't for her, I never would have met my current wife of 12 years. Tiffany. Our exes didn't stay together after this. Their relationship was based entirely on fleeting emotions, infatuation, and excitement.